Sit your ass! You will not laugh. You will not cry. You will learn by the numbers. I will teach you. Now get up!
Good evening, friends. It's Friday, which means it's time once again for another enlightening episode of Hobbservations on Roads to Liberty, part of the Think Liberty Network. That is, think-liberty.com for all your libertarian podcasting needs. Think-liberty.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Go there, subscribe to us, subscribe to one of the other podcasts on the network. We're not the only one, but I do like to think that we are the best. Quick admin note before we get started tonight. We have our merch store up and running. We have some pretty cool shirts on there. The address is roads2liberty.com. roads2liberty.com for our shirts and mugs, and other stuff is going to be added as we go. There's one of our lovely shirts right there on the side of the screen. Yes, roads2liberty.com. Also, today, if you guys are interested, I sat down with Adam Kokesh of Adam versus the Man, and we had a little discussion on my current congressional campaign, as well as going off into the weeds on some kind of black-pilled conspiracy theory type stuff. It was really interesting. They told me I'd get 10 to 20 minutes, and I think I had like 40. So that was pretty cool. If you want to go to Adam Kokesh's YouTube page, it is episode number 490, and I come in at about the 45-minute mark. Okay, so today we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of what we're here. We're talking once again to my buddy Alex up in Wisconsin. How are you doing this evening, my friend?
Good enough.
Good enough. I guess that's as best as we can hope for in these
now in Wisconsin. Yeah, pretty much sums it up.
Yes. For those of you who didn't watch the last episode that we did with Alex, we kind of talked about the similarities between what's going on in America right now and compared it to what happened in the waning days of the Soviet Union. Alex, of course, is a Russian immigrant, and he was 16 or 17 around that time, so he remembers it
17.
very well. Yep, 17 at that time, and remembers it very well. So we talked about some of the similarities. And the other day, you texted me, and you said something to the effect of what's going on right now with all of the riots and the looting and everything like that feels an awful lot like that time, only in fast forward. So would you care to kind of expand on that and tell us exactly what it was that you meant by that?
So number one thing that I kind of reminded me is the complete paralysis of federal government. Meaning we have a president, we have a federal law enforcement, but they're not doing anything to stop all this lawlessness. And we have certain local governments that basically acting as traitors. I can't come up with a different term for that. When you have a mayor of a major city refusing to stop the violence, and not just refusing, inciting violence in their own communities, I cannot come up with another definition other than, treason. That's just me. I'm not, legal scholar. I can't really tell you what definition of treason is. I'm just speaking for myself. To me, this is the behavior of a person who hates his own country so much that he's willing to do whatever it takes to destroy it. And while I can understand that certain people might be unhappy with the way things turn in their lives, like, maybe he wanted to be president and he only ended up to be mayor of Portland. Who knows? What I don't understand is why federal government is not doing anything to put an end to this. Because at the end of the day, this is why you and I pay our taxes.
Yep.
That's what we need federal government for. Otherwise, we're going to collapse into a tribal society where you and I going to form our own neighborhood watch / game team, and we're going to go and, tax our neighborhood for protection and stuff, right? That's what separates civilized society from tribes. And what I see right now, our federal government is not doing anything, or if they do something, it is completely inadequate. And unfortunately, even though I voted for Trump, and I will probably vote for him again, not because I really like him, but because the alternative scares the crap out of me, I don't think he's a strong leader. I don't think he has the leadership skills to lead people and take them with him. And this is like the biggest resemblance that I see, because at the final years and months of Soviet Union, Gorbachev displayed complete lack of leadership skills.
So you said that the fact that we have a mayor of a major city is not only excusing the violence or failing to stop the violence, but is actively out there inciting the violence or egging it on, or showing, at the bare minimum, a tacit approval of it.
It's just a big block party, right?
Right. Yeah. It's a summer of love, as that one mayor up in Seattle said. Did you see a lot of that, where mayors or maybe like county supervisors or whatever the rank or whatever it was, were people kind of splitting off their own autonomous zones at the end of the Soviet Union, or was that more like a?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was.
And the size of them, was it just like cities, or was it like
restricted? No, it were more like so if you remember, Soviet Union was the union of 15 independent Soviet republics. So each republic technically was an independent state that decided to join the Soviet Union. Now, in Soviet Union, we had our own special type of government system called Soviet Republic. So it's not just republic, it's Soviet. And Soviet really literally means council. So it was governed by a council of workers and farmers. And they would elect, party officials that would actually, be the executive branch. And that's like a very high level overview. But nonetheless, those republics were independent states on the paper. In reality, the Communist Party of Soviet Union were kind of like a federal government, and they really used to tell all the republic governments what to do, and they would just do it. Towards the end, those small republics would just say, we're just not going to do it. Now, those republics were typically larger than any American state, well, maybe with the exception of California, but California is so huge and overpopulated. So that's. But my point is, certain republics would just refuse to follow the, not orders, but like decisions or federal law, and nobody would do anything about it. Like, federal government would not force them to follow the law. And initially it would just create a bad precedent, but then another republic would follow them, and then another one, and you would never know which law will be followed and which law would not be followed. And that created the atmosphere of chaos, kind of like what we see now. Here's an example. Let's take this incident in Kenosha, right? This kid, Kyle, who shot 3 unarmed terrorists, I can't call them protesters because they didn't come to protest. You don't start protest at 10 p.m. You start a riot.
Mhm.
If you come to any town or city with the idea that you're going to burn things and break stuff, you're not a protester. You're a terrorist. You're using violence to accomplish political goal. That's the definition of terrorism. So when Kyle shot those 3 terrorists, the district attorney charged him, but he didn't charge the one that actually survived the shooting, the guy that he shot in the arm, even though he used deadly force against him. He pointed a pistol at him. There is enough evidence that shows that he had a gun in his hand, that he used the gun to project lethal force, and he attacked the minor.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
makes it even worse.
Yeah,
right?
we talked about that.
And not only that, he was convicted felon before.
Right.
When people say Kyle did not have legal rights to have a firearm, I'm not a law professor. I can't argue that point. But definitely the other guy also didn't have legal rights, but he wasn't charged.
Yeah.
So we see how our district attorney applying law based on political profit or whatever you're going to call it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not objective, like, the justice is blind kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's
I
something
like you, so I'm not going to charge you. I really don't like you, so I'm going to charge you double.
Yeah, that's something that I brought up in our Tuesday show was the fact that the people that are typically out there doing the rioting and talking about defund the police and abolish the police and all this other stuff, it's not because they actually want to abolish the police or defund the police. It's because they want to become the police, and they want to replace our objective law
That's
with
right.
a sort of subjective, ever-changing social justice standards of what the law is, and they'll be the ones in charge of determining, what is legal today might not be illegal tomorrow. And I said that here in Western societies, we've built our legal system on oceans of blood and mountains of corpses and 2,000 years of development to get this system that is not perfect, but it is the best system that's ever been developed. And, it's not just America either. It's all of what can be considered to be Western society.
Not just the Western society, civilized societies.
It's a civilized society.
Going back thousands of years until somebody decided that you can't just have a single king or a chief who decides how we're going to live. We need to have a set of written rules. And I believe it started in Mesopotamia like a long time ago. I don't remember the exact date, but they were the first ones who actually came up with a written set of rules.
Hammurabi's law. Yeah, Hammurabi's law.
Exactly. So now we're going back before that time, and we're saying, we're going to tell you what is right and what is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't like you, we're going to tell you that what you did is wrong. Even though the guy right next to you did the same thing, but we like him, so it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You see, I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump. I have my own reasons to think that he is not the best potential candidate this country can offer. But at least he understands that lawlessness is bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of kind of the lawlessness in the street, I'm sure that by now you've heard about the situation that happened in Portland over the weekend, where some people from Patriot Prayer decided that they were going to have a re-elect Trump convoy going through downtown Portland. And at the end of it, I guess a couple of these guys were walking down the streets when one of them was shot and killed. Now, the video evidence seems to point out that this was a coordinated hit, like an assassination, a political assassination. The guy who did it was interviewed by Vice News yesterday, I think, about why he did it, and he claims he was doing it because the man he shot was attempting to stab a friend of his. Judging by the video evidence that we saw, and it would seem that the cameraman who took the video evidence was in on the entire thing. I watched a breakdown of it today, and I'll send that link to you after the show. But I watched a breakdown of it today where you can see a coordinated effort to set up a kill box and to ambush this guy and to kill him. And the guy who killed him, federal marshals tried to apprehend him this morning at about 4 o'clock in the morning. They rolled up on him and they got into a firefight, and he ended up losing that firefight with the federal marshals.
Second place in the fastest draw competition.
Pretty much, yeah. You don't go after 4 federal marshals and expect to come out on the other side unless you're.
Did you bring the skateboard?
Yeah, bring the skateboard. But it's been kind of floated out there that particular assassination in Portland was due in retaliation to the Kyle Rittenhouse Kenosha incident that happened the week prior. As we're seeing this sort of breakdown of the institutions of law and order and whatnot, especially with you being so close to Kenosha and everything going on, are you seeing kind of a bleed off into your areas or things?
Yes. So
yes.
Here is what I saw. If I'm not mistaken, the incident took place almost 2 weeks ago on Monday. That very day in Madison, and I'm in Madison, Wisconsin, that very day in Madison, there was a big riot. A friend of mine and I, we went to downtown area, and we wanted to see for ourselves what it looks like. Here are the things that I saw. When we hear people talking and telling us that it's a mostly peaceful protest, they are lying. First of all, as I said, you don't start peaceful protest at 10:30 p.m. You start peaceful protest at noon or at 10 a.m. where you see people and people can see your message. If your protest is peaceful, you bring your sign and you protest whatever you want to protest. Global warming, global overheating, particular brand of ice cream, animal cruelty, whatever, right? You need people to see your position. When you gather your friends at 10:30, and it was scheduled at 10:30 at the Capitol Square, the only purpose you can accomplish at that point is violence and destruction, nothing else. So that's the first point. Second, if you and I gonna organize protest, let's say we want to protest some new proposed gun law because we believe in Constitution and Second Amendment, we're not going to distribute flyers calling for destruction that will say, fuck shit up. Do whatever you want. Because those are literally the things that the flyers said. So they openly calling for violence. Now, you don't come to protest wearing a military gas mask. Let's say I was in position by 9 p.m. and I was observing and taking photos of people that were coming to this area. There was a large number of them coming with the military gas masks. You don't need a gas mask for a peaceful protest. You do need a gas mask if you plan on getting into a fight with police and you expect them to deploy chemical agents. You don't bring people with the big backpacks that had a red duct tape, or like red cross on them, and written big letters, medic. You don't need that for a peaceful protest.
Mm-hmm.
You do need that if you expect to get into a fight and you hope that someone can, render aid to your wounded comrades. And lastly, you don't bring canisters of gasoline to protest. This is not protest. If you bring gasoline, this is not a protest.
Yeah.
This is a terrorism act.
So I read I get the early warning report from Forward Observer, and I read in one of them that a group called Riot Kitchen 209 was dispatched from Seattle, I think is where they're at. And they went to Kenosha, and they got hemmed up by local law enforcement there for they were kind of suspicious of this group because they were obviously traveling in cars with out-of-state plates, and they were observed at a gas station filling up gas cans and bottles and whatnot. And so when they got away from the gas station, the cops pulled them over and discovered that they had not only several cans of gasoline in the car, but they were also equipped with riot body armor, not ballistic body armor, but like the padded stuff that you can take a beating
Like
in, and
hockey
gas
gear.
Yeah, kind of like hockey gear, and gas masks as well. And Riot Kitchen on their official Twitter, they put out on Twitter, "We're going to Kenosha to set up a field kitchen to feed and care for any peaceful protesters." But what
Mostly
they were doing,
peaceful
mostly
protest.
peaceful protesters.
Mostly.
And it seems like what they were really there to do was to obviously loot, riot, destroy, disrupt, demoralize, do all of the things that these rioters seem
So
to be.
remember, about 2-3 weeks ago, before Kenosha, we talked about this, and I told you nobody can sustain 3 months of fighting without a rotation. So I told you, just like you've been deployed multiple times, those guys are being deployed to what they consider to be the war zone right now, which is Seattle and Portland. Now, I did not even know about Forward Observer at that point. You told me about that website later. I kind of figured it out based on other things that I saw. So I'm not surprised at all. I think what's going on in Seattle and Portland is those terrorist groups, Antifa and BLM, and I believe BLM is a terrorist group right now because while I do believe that Black Lives Matter just as much as any other life, right? Yellow, purple, green, whatever. Lives matter, period. If you need to define which one, then you're racist. I believe that as an organization, BLM is just a money laundering facade for Democratic Party. And their main purpose is to incite violence in our cities. Because everywhere they show up, there is violence.
Right.
So
yeah, I saw.
I believe those groups, they use those cities right now to train up their members for what's going to happen after the election.
Right. I saw a video this morning of a guy who was he was walking around Portland trying to figure out, like, all these people, where are they going after these protests are done? Are they going back to houses or whatever? And he happened to be walking over an overpass, and he looked down, and there's a tent city constructed in a vacant parking lot. And they're not like camping tents either. They're all uniform. They're all blue, and they're all like long-term, almost like a medium military tent, only blue. And this vacant parking lot, if you look it up on like Google Maps, you'll find out that it is permanently closed. It was just a paid parking lot or whatever, but it's permanently closed. And this tent city is surrounded by a 6 or 7 foot high privacy fence. So nobody knows it's there unless you actually get up on top of this overpass and are able to get to the railing and look down into this camp. And while this guy was out there, he's like, I think I know where the rioters are going at the end of the night. And while he's sitting there, like filming and looking around, some people are coming out of their tents, and one guy had a slingshot and was shooting rocks at him up on top of it. And apparently what the privacy fence and this whole thing is being labeled by the city, because the city is paying for it, apparently. It's being labeled as an art exhibit. Like they're going to paint a mural on this fence or something, or that's at least the cover that they're using. So when I saw that video today, it immediately made me think of what you were just talking there. Like Portland and Seattle are Antifa and BLM's version of Fort Irwin and Fort Polk to the Army. It's places where you send troops to get as realistic of training as you can before you send them out to the actual war zone.
Yep. Now, couple other things to consider. Logistics. You got to feed them. You got to house them. You got to equip them. Who is paying for it?
Absolutely correct. And if a Trump interview that I saw the other day with what was her name? I think it was Dana Perino on Fox. He was saying that the Justice Department is actually starting to connect some dots and follow the money back to a source. Now, whether or not that's true or that's just him, being Trump and dropping some breadcrumbs to see who bites, that remains to be seen. Hillary Clinton was supposed to be under the jail by now, and that hasn't happened. So we'll see.
Yeah. You and I know that that's not going to happen.
Yeah. So we'll see what comes of this investigation, if it actually is happening. Let's see what else. What else has been going on that you've been seeing, or anything else going on that reminds you of stuff?
Okay, here is another thing. Remember when the rioting in Kenosha started, there was a video circulating online where a bunch of guys kind of like ambushed police armored vehicle.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it MRAP because it doesn't look like one, but it's definitely armored vehicle used by a SWAT team. I think they used it to basically get close to the suspect. So did you watch that video closely? Did you notice the increase in level of training?
No, I only saw still images and read articles about it. I didn't actually watch the video.
So few things that kind of caught my attention. They did bring AR-15s. 4 years ago, they would never bring a firearm. They would bring baseball bats. They would bring stupid things like improvised weapons, but they would not bring real firearms. Now, we had a number of them with the firearms in a low-ready position. Not only they brought firearms, the way they spaced themselves, they did not block each other firing lanes. And they were actively maneuvering to avoid blocking each other firing lanes. And they did all of that in a combination with a human shield in front of the vehicle.
So I guess this kind of goes into the whole who's paying for this, because that sort of training
and who's training them. This is not a spontaneous act.
Yeah. There's one famous, well, infamous guy that kind of fell off of the out of the public view a couple of years ago. His name was Spencer Rapone. He was an infantryman in the Army, had a deployment to Afghanistan, came back from Afghanistan, and got into West Point on the OCS program, Officer Candidacy School. And while he was there, I guess before he went into West Point, he already had some pretty far left ideas. But while he was there, and this is the part that just blows my mind, the fact that there would be a radical communist professor at West Point, to me, I'm just a little bit blown away by that. But I guess this Spencer Rapone guy was radicalized by one of his professors there. And at graduation, he was wearing a Che Guevara t-shirt under his dress uniform that he pulled his own. Yeah, you remember the guy, right? And the hat, communism will win on the inside. Well, he got discharged for that. So to me, when I heard about that, a lot of people were like, oh, he got cocky and he got what he deserved getting kicked out. And I said, no. This is a guy who was an infantryman with a combat deployment. And I think he was a ranger too. And then he went to the battle college, got all of that education, the whole showing off the Che Guevara shirt and the message in the hat and everything. That was intentional in order to get discharged from the Army, because now he's got a premier education from West Point Military Academy and a combat tour, and is no longer contractually obligated to be in the Army. So where is that guy now? Who is he passing his knowledge on to? If you think that him going to West Point and then getting himself kicked out of the Army was an accident, I got a bridge to sell you. He's out there, him and many people like him, and people are going to Kurdistan and Syria and getting training there with the YPG and the PKK, which are also kind of left-wing Marxist communist groups that are in that area there, and they're bringing that back.
Now, another thing to consider. Remember how a while back there was I forgot what documentary it was. It was about the drug cartels, how they were convincing young Latinos to go join U.S. military and serve honorably. So they would build up people with combat military experience that could later come and join their, fighting ranks.
Right.
Why those Antifa guys couldn't do this? Or why do we think they couldn't do this? Because again, if you remember our conversations years back, I always said they're going to learn.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a sacred knowledge that only you and I, have access to.
Yep. Yeah,
people around the world kind of figure out how to kill each other.
Yeah, we've been doing it since the beginning of time. Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah, and you're right. There is no reason that that these guys, the ones that are actually physically capable of making it, because I mean, let's not kid ourselves. The stereotype of Antifa as being noodle-armed beta males it exists for a reason, but there are
it does men and women for a reason. But you also remember what people said about the who made all the people equal. I forgot the saying that.
Yeah, but there are men and women among them who would probably have no problem making it through military basic training in a 3-year stint in whatever branch they decided to go into, and then come back and pass that on.
Another thing that we also need to keep in mind that we do have real problem in America with the class inequality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean we should do something violent about improving the situation. No, I'm not saying that. But I do say that when, on one hand, you have people like Jeff Bezos and, Bill Gates, And on the other hand, you do have some poor black communities that really struggling getting food on the table.
Hmm.
It does need to be addressed. Now, I don't have a perfect solution for that, but so when this whole pandemic started, I was shocked to find out that apparently some kids in my son's class, they actually rely on school feeding them because otherwise they got nothing else to eat at home.
That's sad.
It is. It is really sad. And I think what we see now is the consequences or, the escalation of that problem that certain people, and I don't know who they are, but I think certain people trying to turn it into a race war, when in reality it's more of a class war.
Right. Yeah. There's an interesting books and lectures and stuff from numerous people throughout history that after the Second World War, actually after the First World War, when the International Communist Party decided that they were going to, set their sights on America and Europe, they came to the conclusion that instigating a strictly class-based war in America was kind of a failing issue because the wealth dynamic in this country was so fluid, and opportunities at that time were, if you had an idea, you could be a millionaire. Basically,
Soon.
anybody could do it.
Yes.
And so they decided to, rather than poke at class issues, they would then poke at race issues, because at that time the United States was the most racially diverse country on the planet, and there were a lot of old wounds that hadn't quite healed yet. So that was kind of there's a guy who wrote a book. I forget what his name was, but his book, he was a black guy who became a member of the Communist Party USA because he truly believed that communism was going to be the way to lift his people out of poverty and inequality and whatnot
Mhm.
in America. And he wrote this book in the 1920s when he came to the conclusion that he was expendable and everybody else like him was expendable. It wasn't really about equality so much as it was advancing the narrative and the ideology. And he wrote a book called, I think it was called Color, Communism, and the American Negro, about how he came to the conclusion that he and other people like him were being used for their racial disadvantages in this country, in order to, rather than their class disadvantages like was being used in other countries, to push communism in this country. So now we have in our country, now we've had so much government coming down, kind of choking and making these unnatural monopolies. Guys like Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and whatnot have amassed so much wealth simply because they're kind of gaming the system. And now it's kind of come full circle back around to that class warfare that you were talking about, adding in the race war part. So we've kind of got a perfect storm brewing here for a lot of civil unrest.
Yes, there might be multiple forces at play, and again, it's really easy for two guys like you and I'm sitting in my basement and I'm coming up with conspiracy theories faster than Alex Jones ever could, which again, pretty much everything I say should be divided in half at least, I'd say. So I don't have access to secret files in secret places. Like I don't know any Men in Blacks, any kind of stuff like that. But so when I think we need to understand that there are a lot of unhappy people right now, and some of them trying to benefit from the opportunities that they see. And unfortunately, we have this destabilizing mix of things that happening right now. I just don't know how else I can describe this. It's like a mix of things that destabilize the situation.
Hmm.
And everyone is trying to find a way to profit from this particular moment without thinking about the consequences and what impact their actions going to have on the future of our country.
And not just our country, but the entire world. It was something that I
The
said
entire
on.
world is pretty much bracing for impact.
Yeah.
Because, so here's the question for you. How many presidents we're going to have in November?
It's a good question. Not just presidents either. It was something that I talked with Adam Kokesh today in our interview. I said that already the media is starting to frame this narrative that the election, no matter what the results are going to be, is going to end up being contested.
Pretty much. Yep.
They had an article coming out that said brace for the red mirage, where Trump is going to appear to win in an absolute landslide on election day, but in 2 or 3 weeks, when all of the mail-in ballots are counted, Biden could eke out a victory. And so what I was saying to Kokesh today was, it's not just going to be the presidential election, because if one side or the other is accusing the other side of either voter fraud or voter suppression in one manner or another, every down ballot ticket is going to be contested. Who's our senator? Is it the Republican or the Democrat? Now, obviously, some places like California and where I live are pretty solid Republican or Democrat. But you've got other districts where last election it was a Democrat, this one it was a Republican, and they just flip back and forth. They're the so-called purple states and battleground states.
Yep.
So
Wisconsin is one of them.
Exactly. So come time to seat the next Congress next year, early next year, who's going to Washington, D.C.? Are the Republicans and Democrats each going to send one and they're both going to fight it out in the street? What's going on? Who's going to be our senators? Who's going to be our Congress critters? We don't know.
Here's another question for you. Imagine you are Vladimir Putin right now.
Ooh.
And you need to figure out who gets access to the largest nuclear arsenal in the world.
Yep.
And how do you deal with them? And if there's going to be one person, or 2, 3, how many?
Yep. And
are they getting access to nuclear codes?
Yeah, and the Chinese are probably thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Imagine you have Ilhan Omar with your fingers on the nuclear codes.
Right, because we all know that Joe Biden's not making Joe Biden's decisions. I think that that can safely be assumed, and that's not a joke at somebody's expense. That's just an honest to God observation that you can see if you have eyes and the ability to not be blinded by your own bias. Joe Biden is not there. Joe Biden is not making Joe Biden's decisions. Who is the big question, but it's not him.
It's right. And again, this is legitimate concern. So the question is, who do you negotiate with? Who do you talk to?
Right.
Imagine you're a foreign leader who, projects some power somewhere in the world. And I'm not talking about, small countries like Luxembourg. To them, it doesn't really matter because nobody asks their opinion anyway. But let's say you are, I don't know, German chancellor.
Yeah.
Or, you Russian president. You kind of want to know who you're going to talk to.
Right.
Because it's important that you both stay within certain boundaries. Nobody wants to see a full-out war between Russia and the United States over, some failed country in Europe or Middle East.
Yeah. That would be
And
devastating.
I may sound really cynical right now, but that's the reality of, the world we live in. It might be not pretty, but it doesn't change the fact that that's the way it works.
Mhm.
That's the reality.
Yeah, and this reality this year is it's wild. It's been pretty
And
crazy.
remember, one of the reasons why people did not want to vote for Hillary previous election is because nobody wanted to see a full-out war between Russia and United States in Syria.
Hmm. And she basically had vowed that would be
And she
the case.
basically made it very clear that we go into war.
Yeah.
And like, whoa, time out. This is like dumbest idea ever. Let's not do that. Nothing is going to happen out of it. We've tried that for 50 years. That did not go well.
Yeah.
Let's not do it again.
Yeah, because I don't. It might just be my normalcy bias kicking in, or the fact that everything's kind of closer to home. But I think that the leaders on both sides of the Cold War were a lot more level-headed than the current crop of leadership that we have, and that's the only reason we didn't kind of irradiate the whole fucking planet.
What's the biggest difference? Until Bill Clinton, every single one of them actually served in the military. And most of them saw action during the World War II.
Yeah, I guess that is.
And they all understood the real meaning of what war means. Like, I hear a lot of conversation between younger kids when they talk about, well, we're going to have a war, we're going to do this, and this war, like, you're stupid people. You don't want to have a war. And you've seen what war is. It's not pretty. It's not like you go into riot from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. and then you go home, you eat your breakfast, you shower, you play video games, and then you go riot again next night.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
It's not a war.
No, it's not war. It's a game. Real war, if you're behind enemy line, you wake up in a cold house, you don't have electricity, you don't have running water, you barely have something to eat, you don't know what you're going to eat next day. If you need to get water, you got to walk a couple miles to the nearest pond. Then you have to boil that water or filter it somehow. And you have to do it while nobody can see you, because they will take that water away from you or kill you.
Yep, it's
and that's just one
terrible.
small portion of life in a war condition, in a war zone.
It's absolutely hellish.
Yes.
And it's like I said on Tuesday. I like you said, we both know what war looks like, and I don't want to see that come to this country. Not just for selfish reasons, but also because the war that I know is Iraq. That's my frame of reference. But the problem with that frame of reference is that when Iraq burns, it sucks for Iraq. But if the United States burns, it's going to suck for the entire world.
There's that, but also keep in mind that in Iraq, there was one dominant side.
Mm-hmm.
U.S. military dominated Iraqi military, and every single person in the world knew that there is no way Iraqi military can put up a meaningful fight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I hope to God that will never happen here on our soil, but if it happens and our military gets divided and starts fighting each other, whether it's going to be National Guard versus Federal Army or however that's going to happen. During the Civil War, the worst thing about Civil War is both sides feel betrayed.
Mm-hmm.
And that escalates violence to completely unprecedented levels. This is where you see genocide.
Absolutely.
United States did not wage genocide in Iraq.
Yeah, quite the opposite. We did basically everything we could to keep as much infrastructure and everything intact.
Right. Now,
because we had every intention of giving it back.
Let's look at what happened in Yugoslavia. Keep in mind, those people, for many, many years, they lived in one country fairly happily. They had pretty high standards of living. They served in the same military. They had happy life. And all of a sudden, hell broke loose, and they started fighting. And then you see mass graves. You've seen genocide. You've seen mass killings. People become animals. This is what civil war is. When people think it's going to be fun, no. No.
Absolutely not.
And to those people who think that they prepared because they have AR-15 and 75,000 rounds in their basement, I have bad news for you. Your AR-15 means nothing against, M1 tank.
Yeah.
It literally means nothing. Or a Humvee with M2 mounted on top. I'm sorry to burst their bubble, but you know how that works, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's going to come down to who ends up controlling those assets.
Yeah.
I would like to think that if something were to happen, some type of civil conflict or whatever, that the military would take kind of a neutral side and tell the other sides to hash out your differences and we'll be here. But if history's taught us anything, I think that
eventually they will have to take a side.
Yeah.
If they remain as a unified force, more likely they will break into smaller groups.
Yeah. I think AWOLs, desertions, troops taking whatever they can get away with to go to their regional area. It's not going to be 1865 type civil war where you've got two distinct sides battling it out. It's going to be regional. It's going to be neighborhood to neighborhood, street to street. People are going to be taking advantage to settle old scores. You're going to have people killing each other over petty shit that goes back generations. Food, water. Yep.
Who's gonna supply food in grocery stores?
Nobody.
Who's gonna do it? Especially in those states that propose universal income. Yep. Who's gonna do it?
That's a whole other can of worms, but we're coming up on an hour here, and we're gonna, I think, call it a night. I got some chores that I need to get done, but before we go, I'd just like to remind everybody that we're on think-liberty.com. We also have our merchandise store at roads2liberty.com. Go there and buy one of our cool designs and stuff. So why don't you just give us something to take us out of the night for?
I'd like to hope that we are not past the point of saving, and I would like people to step back, take a deep breath, and think about what they got to lose, because they've got a lot to lose. If they keep going this direction, they will find themselves in a really bad position. Everyone is going to suffer. Everyone.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to come winner in this case. No matter how wealthy you are, no matter how prepared you are, no matter how many ARs you have in your safe. So.
Yeah, we all lose.
I have kids running in the background.
Yeah, I see him back there.
They
Tell them
got
hi.
tired playing video games sitting next to me, and they acted really, really quietly as long as they could, and then they said,
Yeah.
"Screw this,
Yeah,
enough is enough."
you can only have the kids quiet for so long. Well, I think that's a good place to call it a night. Thank you so much for joining us tonight,
Sure,
Alex.
man.
I
Good to
always
see you.
enjoy our talks. Thank you, everybody out there who's watching. We had quite a few comments over. Didn't really get to any of them. You guys are great, though. Pete Musico, I will send you a DM after this, and we'll talk about what you're talking about over there. Everybody, once again, for the final time, think-liberty.com and roads, the number 2, liberty.com. Thank you